Hi everyone, it's Joe here from Lawn Solutions Australia, and welcome to this episode of Turf Talk, where I'm very excited to be joined by one of the legends of our industry, the turf industry, in Lynn Davidson. Lynn, how you going?
Pretty good, thanks, Joe.
That's good. Now, Lynn is the owner of Jimboomba Turf. Now, Jimboomba Turf are one of the largest turf farms in Australia and a real pioneering company for turf, for our industry. Lynn, do you want to just give a little bit of an overview about the business, the size of the business, where you are and what kind of markets you service to start with?
Sure, Joe. Nowadays, we're a lot smaller than what we used to be. Mm-hmm. We've divested one of our farms into grow houses some time ago. So we're about half the size in terms of volume as what we used to be. Uh-huh. But we operate now mainly and exclusively in the domestic market, as well as supplying Bunnings. Mm-hmm. Whereas time before, we were everything to anyone.
Everything to everyone. And you're south of Brisbane?
Yes.
Servicing Brisbane and Gold Coast?
Correct.
We'll just jump back a bit. We'll come back into the Jimboomba Turf story a little bit later, but you've got an interesting background, and it's an interesting story to get to where you've got to today. So why don't you wind it back and tell everyone where you were born and what growing up was like in the town where you were from?
Well, it's probably documented a little bit, Joe, but I was born in Western Queensland, in Longreach in Western Queensland. We had a sheep and cattle station there, 30,000 acres. And we used to run about 1,000 head of cattle and 10 or 15,000 head of sheep. Mm-hmm. And I was there from, I was born there until we shifted, until we bought the Jimboomba Turf business.
So what's it like growing up on a 30,000 acre farm? There wouldn't be much spare time, I wouldn't think.
No, it's just like, there's nothing unusual for us when we lived there. Yeah. We just go about your normal business of looking after your stock and fixing windmills and all the stuff you do out in the bush. So
how did you get around a farm that size in that day? Are we because they're doing it on helicopters now?
There's no helicopters in those days. They probably weren't invented, I think, but mainly horses and motorbikes.
Okay.
Yeah, we did a lot of horse work.
Yeah.
And a lot of motorbike work.
So Longreach it's a long way from anywhere, really, isn't it?
In those days, we used to drive down to Brisbane in a day because we used to go pretty hard then. Yeah. But it's actually 2 days nowadays.
Yeah. What led you to want to sort of get out of there? Was it just – it'd be a pretty tough place to farm, I'd imagine, wouldn't it, Longreach? Hot and dry?
Yes and no. It's a very arid area. Yeah. But it's probably no different to a lot of rural Australia. Yeah. Comes and goes with the seasons. But we had a bit of a disruption in our family. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I had not long got married. So we thought, well, let's have a look around and see what else there is. Yeah. And it was quite, I suppose, accident actually we came across a turf farm. Okay. Because my dad and I were down about 10 miles from the station fixing a windmill. And he had not long been to Brisbane before. And we had a country life with him. And we were reading the country life. And lunch was wrapped up, actually. And he says, hey, look at the turf farm here. I said, what is turf farm? He said, well, I was down in Brisbane the other day and I saw rolls of turf, rolls of grass rolled on the back of a truck. He said, I think that's what it is. So I'm going down to Brisbane a month or so. We're going to have a look. Yeah. Anyway, he did. And then he rang me up next day and said, I think you should come have a look at this because it looks pretty good. Yeah. And it's a big river there and it's plenty of water and the river never goes dry. Yeah. And water was a very scarce commodity in Western Queensland. Mm-hmm. And he was captivated by the pump shed, had a big green button. He said, look at that. He pushed that green button and the water all over the farm. It doesn't happen in Western Queensland. Yeah. I get it. So that sort of led us into one thing led to another. And it wasn't long after that we owned a turf farm. My dad and I bought the turf farm and we sold the grazing properties in Western Queensland.
So you sold the 30,000 acres in Western Queensland and everyone shifted? There's no one left in Longreach? Yeah. Mm. Everyone moved to southeast Queensland. And so the biggest, probably at its peak, the biggest turf farm in Australia, I would have imagined, but a massive pioneering turf business came from a lunch wrapper.
Basically, yeah.
It's funny how things end up like that, isn't it? And so you moved from Longreach, you moved to Jimboomba, Allenview area, southeast Queensland area. What was the biggest change you noticed straight away from raising thousands and thousands of cattle and sheep to growing grass? What shocked you the most initially?
A lot of things probably, because we had no knowledge whatsoever of grass, and we hardly had a lawn in Longreach, and we used to mow it when you could start the lawnmower. But it was a complete change of how our lives went on.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot to us to adapt, basically. But we were fortunate. We had a full staff of, took over a full complement of staff who were very good, which got us through.
So you bought it as Jimboomba Turf, or you renamed it?
No, we bought it as Jimboomba Turf.
So what year was this that you purchased Jimboomba?
1981.
1981. And it had been running for a while since before then?
Since 73, I believe.
Okay, so it would be one of the older turf farms in Australia.
Probably, 50-year anniversary.
50-year anniversary just recently, Okay, so you bought the business. Now, back in the early 80s, was there a lot of industry knowledge available to you, or did you fly pretty blind initially?
Very blind.
Yeah.
It's probably quite the opposite to what it is now.
Yeah.
Where we came from in the bush, we had a lot of community involvement, I suppose. You know, all us young fellas get around and we'd talk about our stock and talk about whatever. But we found it very difficult when it came down to this environment because there was no one to lean on.
Yeah.
No one whatsoever except ourselves. And we had no knowledge on it. So we sort of had to bumble along a bit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, I don't know, it's probably 10 or 15 years later maybe, that we started to make contact with other turf farmers. And for some reason, it wasn't acceptable or whatever to talk to other turf farmers. I don't quite know why to this day, but we never did.
Was Turf Australia around at this time?
No, Turf Australia didn't start until 2000s, early 2000s.
Oh, so you went a good nearly 20 years without an association.
Oh, my word,
Yeah. And what did the industry look like in the early 80s? What sort of equipment are you using? Were there many turf farms around? What did it sort of look like?
There was a lot of small turf farms around, Joe.
Yeah.
And they were the biggest competition because they had little trucks, little Ryan turf cut, and they had 10 acres at the back of the house sort of.
Yeah.
And there was only a couple of larger ones in the Brisbane area. But back in those days, all the turf was cut by Ryan turf cutters, which is nothing new about that. There's a lot of turf is still cut by Ryan turf cutters.
Yep.
Busted down old trucks, and I think forklifts didn't come in until probably a couple of years after we started.
Yep.
So everything was hand load on the trucks.
So you guys started with Ryan cutters and hand loading?
Oh, my word,
Yeah.
Which was very character building.
Yeah, I bet. That's one word for it.
Yeah.
And what does a day look like? Say, what's a typical day in the early 80s on a turf farm? You might have let's say you have 1,000 metres of turf to cut that day. Would that be hand cut, hand stack, hand deliver 1,000 metres of grass?
Well, we had a little trailer that had about, 4 or 6 Ryan turf cutters on it.
Okay.
So we'd let it go down the paddock and all these blokes would start cutting one way. And then there's another, we had blokes all over the place feeling and 20, 30 fellas there.
Yeah.
They'd stack all this turf or either load onto trucks directly or as time went on, we'd stack it on the pallets.
Yeah.
And then pick the pallets up with these old forklift trucks with no power steering. And that's how it sort of went on.
Yeah.
But we had blokes all over the place.
Yeah. So it was obviously very labour intensive.
Very much so, yes.
Compared to what it is now. And what turf varieties did you initially start with? What was on the farm when you got there?
Just green cooch, yes.
That was it?
Green, that was it, yeah. Blue cooch was a very, product was very well known, but it was hard to grow because you couldn't keep the weeds out of it. And it fell to bits and all the rest of it. But green cooch sort of naturally evolved, and it was just a nature's blend, really.
Yeah. And when did the first sort of introduction to these new varieties like softleaf buffalo come for you? That would have been, 15, 20 years into the journey then?
The buffaloes, the Sir Walters didn't come around, I suppose, until the mid-90s. I don't know, a lot of time's gone past. But Legend was one of the first of the new ones that came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we grew a lot of that.
Yep.
We had a very strong relationship with Strathclyde.
Yep.
With a licence also at that point in time. So we grew a fair bit of that and did a lot of overwork around the countryside.
So that was with Bill Casamati at the time, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, Bill Casamati, wonderful man.
It's funny how the Strathclyde and the Jimboomba businesses are still running to this day. So it's a credit to both. And it's a pretty amazing story. I know we haven't actually had anyone from Strathclyde on this podcast, but I've heard Bill's story. And Bill is probably parallel to yourself in terms of the innovation and the pioneering that you've both done in the turf industry. And now you've had a long relationship with Sir Walter, with Lawn Solutions going back 25, probably more years. How did the first introduction come to Sir Walter buffalo?
Funny story. I was only thinking about that last night when we were talking about it. I think Max Stevenson might have been growing it a little bit before we were.
Yep.
And a couple of fellows by the name of Gavin Rogers and Brent Redmond came up to Max's place, and they were hell-bent on getting Jimboomba to grow some Sir Walter.
Yeah.
And so I went up to Max's office one day when Gavin and Brent were there, and I was sitting in Max's office, and these couple of fellows from Sydney turned up with a briefcase and a carton of beer. So they came in the office, and we sat down and started to talk about this, and next thing they put this contract in front of us, or license in front of us, said, "That's way too big, bloody crazy, couldn't do that." So I'm like, that'd put sort of money to grow grass. Anyway, this bit of paper went backwards and forwards across the desk for some time, and beers went backwards and forwards. So I pushed a paper across, and a beer would come here. Anyway, finally we had a common ground, and we became a licensor for Sir Walter at that meeting.
Yeah, and that would have been early 2000s?
Mid-90s maybe.
Oh, mid-90s, earlier than that. Okay. And so what was the first – was that your first look at buffalo grass? Were you growing buffalo before that? And what was the big change you saw in the Jimboomba business when you started growing Sir Walter? Was it negative at first or positive at first? Or
it was very positive.
Yeah.
Because nationwide, Sir Walter was very lucky to have some of the bigger operators take it up.
Yeah.
And those guys or those businesses put a lot of effort into marketing it, along with the Sir Walter people themselves. So it gained traction very quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, very quickly.
And at the time, was it just you and Twinview Turf? Were they the major Sir Walter growers in Southeast Queensland?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And you still get along with Max from Twinview Turf to this day?
My word. Wonderful man. Wonderful people, It's a lot of respect for them.
Again, it's a great story going back. And if anyone hasn't listened, we've done a podcast with Max too, and it's always an interesting chat with our friend Max. And so at this time, when did you move from Ryan's and hand stacking into, I guess you'd call a hand stack, like let's say a Brower or something like that? When did that change happen? And was that a massive one for you?
It was a huge one because that went from that would have been in the late 80s, mid 80s, somewhere around there.
Okay, right.
Yeah. We got one Brower turf harvester, and then wasn't long after we got another one. We ended up at a few of them, I suppose. But then they ran all the way through until when the first of Trebros came.
Yeah. At what point did you notice the Jimboomba brand really go from, it was probably always a reasonably sized turf farm, but when did you really notice the business sort of skyrocket? Was it the time you started supplying Bunnings stores, was it? Or?
Well, there's a lot of things happening at once. Yeah. Bunnings got going and we've started supplying them and still do to this day all over Southeast Queensland. And about that time, we also started to do a lot of export work.
Okay.
All over Southeast Asia. We had a product we imported from America called Sea Isle, which was a paspalum, a salt-tolerant grass. That was a wonderful product, ideally suited for the Asian environment for golf courses.
Yeah.
So we grew a lot of that and we exported a lot of that all over Asia and into the Middle East.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so we had a lot of things going parallel. We had the rise of Sir Walter and the export happening at the same time. And it's interesting times. So
let's just focus on the export side of things, because I didn't really know that was such a big thing for Jimboomba at the time. So how does work like that come about? How do you find, someone in the Middle East or Southeast Asia and to sell grass to? Once again, it sort of happened by accident. We got the paspalum sea isle grass and we started to grow it and didn't really know what we're going to do with it. And at the same time, the Australian dollar collapsed against the US. And there's also at the same time the golf boom in Asia took off. Right. And a lot of the guys from the golf boom in Australia which we did a lot of work with in the 80s, went to work in Asia. So we knew a lot of them. Yeah. They rang us up and said, we need some grass here. We need some other paspalum stuff. Yeah. No problem. So how do you? So it's easy enough to cut and stack it and take it into Brisbane to deliver it, but how do you take it thousands and thousands of kilometres away? What's that process look like? Well, it's relatively easy actually. Okay. Well, then it was. Yeah. I wouldn't want to do it now. I have to reskill, but you just cut the stolons and wash the stolons. Yeah. And wash them clean. And we used to pack them in chaff bags. Yeah.
with a little bit of dry ice in the middle of them and put them in DQF airline containers. And we'd stack that stuff, put it on an aeroplane like lunchtime per day. It'll be in Dubai or China or somewhere tomorrow. So it wasn't much different to, loading turf on a truck and sitting in the middle of a shed all night and having the suburb next morning.
So who, were you flying blind with learning this stuff, or was there someone there to sort of show you the way?
No, we sort of learned ourselves. My sister had a great influence in that, who unfortunately passed away in 2020. But she was awesome in organising all of that.
Yeah.
And the sorting out the payments and the customs.
Yeah.
Was always a bit of an issue because the guys you had to have it crystal clean to go to be exported. Yeah. No bugs in it.
Yeah.
And they used to take the stuff to the airport and they'd tip a few bags out and they'd put it on a white table under a violet light.
Yeah.
And if they found just one bug, I think they call them springtails, little thing about the size of a pinhead.
Yeah.
The whole lot was canned.
Yeah, okay.
So you'd take your truckload of turf back home. Nearly. Only happened to us nearly once.
Yeah.
But after that, we found a gentleman who could do the paperwork on farm.
Okay.
And he loved his lawn. So we were there packing all the stuff and he'd wander in and say, oh, it looks all right for us. And he'd go and sit down and drink tea for the rest of the day and we'd give him books to read and tell him that we'd put a bloke with him to tell him how good his lawn was and all that. Fix his lawn up.
Whatever works.
Whatever works, yeah. So he just signed off and away we go. Yeah. It was a good arrangement.
How did you go communicating with people in Southeast Asia and the Middle East back then? How'd that work?
It wasn't a big problem because a lot of all the Australians there we dealt with.
Yeah, okay.
Who were the superintendents.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't an issue at all.
What time were we talking here? Is there can you pick up the phone and ring him, or what were you?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you call those things? Emails just started then.
Just started. Oh, that makes it a little bit easier.
So that was a little bit, once the emails got going, it made it a bit simpler.
So I never knew that. That's a great story about shipping sea oil past palm to the Middle East and to Southeast Asia. So again, it just highlights the pioneering.
Middle East was probably some of the wildest times because they didn't like had nematodes there, or they thought they had nematodes. So every import permit or export permit has listed on it the treatments that the importing country requires.
Right.
And this particular one came from a project we were working on outside Dubai at Ras Al Khaimah. And it had to be dipped in chlorpyrifos at a rate of about 50-50. Mm-hmm. We were kind of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we dunked all the bags in chlorpyrifos and satisfied the requirement and sent it off. And I happened to be there the next day when it got there. And all these guys were out in this golf course with bags, dressed up in their white gear they wore there, and they had surgical masks on. Yeah. I said, what is fellow got surgical masks on for? He told us it smelled too much. It's chlorpyrifos. And you could smell the stuff coming across the wind, across the golf course, in the desert air blowing this chlorpyrifos across.
That's sort of
Our project was held up, well, the stuff was held up in Dubai airport because of a nematode problem. Mm-hmm. And there was a political row between Dubai and the neighbouring emirate. And it wasn't held up in nematodes, it was held up politically. Anyway, somehow or other I got to see the Minister of Ag, and on his desk was a little bonsai palm tree.
Right.
And I said, that's a very nice palm tree. Yes, he said, it's quarantined here because it's got nematode. So anyway, after a while we got the stuff out, and that afternoon it came out after sitting in the sun all day out on the tarmac, and away it went.
It survived?
Yeah.
Away it went, yeah.
Nematode had disappeared in a couple of hours.
So that's the international side of Jimboomba Turf, but domestically, like we mentioned before, Bunnings is a big thing for you. How does Lynn Davidson from Longreach end up with a massive Bunnings contract in Southeast Queensland?
That was interesting too, because Bunnings came to Queensland, I don't quite know when, but I heard from the Strathair people that they were dealing with Bunnings in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. And Bill said, you need to go and see these people and supply them turf, because we are. So we found the bloke in Sydney, sitting in the office, and rang him up. And come down, righto. So we went down there, myself and another chap, put our suits on, away we go down there. up and down the street, number whatever it was. We're looking for a skyscraper, Well, it's just a door and a wall on the side of the street. Anyway, at 32 and 12, this must be it. So we're going up these threadbare old stairs, and here's a bloke sitting there singing a pair of slubbies and thongs on. Anyway, I said, I'm the bloke you want to see. Anyway, we're talking away. No, I said, turf will never go in Queensland in Bunnings stores. Okay, so we went back to the airport to the Qantas Club and sort of drowned our sorrows. And a couple of weeks later, the bloke rang up. He said, we'll give turf a go.
Okay.
So away we went. Been there ever since.
Started with one store and now it's
45 or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And was that was a catalyst for big domestic change?
Yes.
Bunnings stores for Jimboomba, wasn't it?
My word, yeah.
Yeah. So how quickly did you notice a massive shift with Bunnings and their turf purchases? Was that a sudden thing or?
Oh, it happened pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Over sort of 10 or 15 year period, they just kept building stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've had a Bunnings relationship for, 15 years now?
Well, since time began. Yeah.
Since time began?
When they first came to Queensland,
Yeah. Wow. Moving forward to, I guess, modern day Jimboomba Turf. So you've invested in a lot of new equipment. You're quite pioneering in that regard with auto harvesters and the like. So what have you seen as the biggest change in the last 10 years for Jimboomba? Is it equipment based mainly, do you think? Or
a lot of things.
Yeah.
We've now got, or the industry, not necessarily us, but the industry has what I call prescription based grasses, where you've got shade grass, you've got sports grasses, you've got all sorts of different grass for different applications. Mm-hmm. Whereas in time began, you just had one grass.
Yeah.
And it either worked or it didn't.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest things. Mm-hmm. And on the back of that, we've been able to tailor the pricing structures for those different areas and also for different grasses.
Yeah.
Which is a huge advantage to what it used to be. Mm-hmm. And also equipment. Equipment now is magnificent compared to what it used to be.
Yeah.
And those Fireflies, they're wonderful bits of gear.
Yeah.
Really and truly they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen the whole journey though, because a lot of people coming into turf farming now, all they've ever known is auto stackers, or in my case, hand stackers and auto stackers. Yes. But you've gone from doing it very, very manually labour intensive to now. These young people mustn't know what they're missing out on.
Yeah, it's interesting because the guys that operate the auto harvesters, they never really feel a piece of turf.
Yeah. Mm.
Whereas when you're doing it manually, well, you've got a feel of whether a piece of turf, a roller or whatever, was going to fall to bits or and it was too heavy or too light or too whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's just what's going up the belt.
Yeah.
So it's a different skill altogether.
Yeah.
And some of them operators can never get that skill. Mm-hmm. I just can't visually sort of imagine it.
Yeah. Mm. And we mentioned the prescription turf grasses before, and I've never heard it described like that. And I think it's a really accurate way of describing it. You've been quite a leader in the zoysia space over the last sort of, what would it be, 5, 6, 7 years with Segrange and others. I know you would have grown other zoysias in the past, but what do you see as the benefits of zoysia grass in southeast Queensland as opposed to, say, a green cooch or a buffalo?
We see a lot of advantages in it because once it's established, it stays very established.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the others don't, but it's got to be established well first. And that takes probably 18 months, 12 or 18 months, 2 years before it gets really netted in. And it's so versatile. You can mow it down to nothing. You can let it go a foot high. Or it looks good. Anywhere in between looks good.
Yeah.
With any other grass doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And Segrange in particular, you were the first. I think we brought Segrange into the country. You were very much a part of that process in 2012, 2013, I believe. And what is it about Segrange in particular that stood out for you initially? Because you were quite an early uptaker and the biggest Segrange seller in Australia.
Well, I suppose we liked the look of it.
Yeah.
It had a good story behind it. Had a lot of research and all sorts of stuff behind it from the US.
Yeah.
So you can't discount that. So we thought, why can't it be transported to this country?
Yeah.
That knowledge, that technology, call it what you may. And we were fortunate to get a project at a golf course in Sydney, Clara Golf Course. And they took a couple of thousand metres, I think. And it looks magnificent down there. The industry hasn't really, or the golf industry hasn't really taken it up as well as they probably should do.
Yeah. It'll get there, I think.
Oh, probably, yeah.
It's such a great solution for golf, but there's obviously apprehension whenever something new comes along, because so many new turf varieties have come and gone from the market. And I just want to, just stepping away from grass for a second now, and we'll just talk associations. You've had a long-term association with our industry body, which is Turf Australia, to the point where you're inducted into the Hall of Fame, Turf Australia Hall of Fame you're inducted into. What are your memories of Turf Australia over the last sort of 20-odd years? Because you're quite an in-depth and important member for a long, long time there.
When the first meeting we had to establish Turf Australia was at the Barossa Valley in whatever year it was. And it was an amazing meeting because there were a lot of people from a lot of turf farms all over the country turned up there. People we'd heard about but never actually met.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible meeting, probably one of the best turf meetings we've ever had.
Yeah.
Because there's new people there. And that meeting, we established Turf Australia.
Yeah.
And Dick Murphy was the first chairman.
And what was your role initially at Turf Australia?
I was one of the first board members on one of the first boards, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you see as the benefit? Because you're quite unique from where a lot of other people are, is you experience time without an association. What do you see as the main benefits of having a body like Turf Australia?
Just camaraderie, being able to speak to know people and being able to speak to them, ring them up and say, Joe, I've got a bit of a problem here with my harvest or with whatever.
Yeah.
And you got someone to talk to. Yeah. Whereas when time began, you didn't. You had to work it out yourself.
And another association that you've obviously been involved with quite heavily is Lawn Solutions, is our business. You were a founding member and you were on the advisory committee from day one. Being in the Sir Walter group and now in the Lawn Solutions group, it's similar but it's different to Turf Australia at the same time. What do you see as the benefits of being a part of a group like Lawn Solutions?
It's very large. It's a huge benefit because Lawn Solutions brings good products, a lot of marketing, and it just makes, I suppose it makes life easier for turf farmers, for people who are inside the room than those that are outside the room.
We've had the opportunity to travel together and sometimes you got the ticket and I didn't, but to go overseas and those sort of things and on turf tours, that's been a pretty eye-opening experience for you, being able to go to Southeast Asia and go to the US and see all these wonderful turf varieties in other countries. Just with Lawn Solutions and the changing in varieties and the way turf's marketed and that sort of thing, where do you kind of see it going in the next few years with turf varieties? Do you think we've got the stable now to carry us through for the next 5 or 10 years, or do you think something else is needed when it comes to turf grass in Australia at the moment?
That's an interesting question because it's very hard for industry to adopt a new product, get it up to marketable quantities, and then try and sell it. It's a 3 or 4 year process. Yeah. And you've got to make sure that the horse you get on is going to win the race. And we've all been in horses that come last. Yeah. And you put a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort and guidance with else, and it doesn't eventuate into the day. So one of the things that Lawn Solutions do is they make sure that product is going to work before it comes to down to the producer level to actually expand the acreage.
Because we've been through this journey a fair bit over the last 10 years with Tiff Tuff, Segrange, and now Zoysia australis. So I guess we're at the point now where, again, we go back to the prescription thing as you described before. We got fine leaf, medium leaf, and coarse leaf to take to the market. It's a pretty big advantage, I'd imagine, from your perspective, from just selling green cooch back in the day. It's funny. Looking back, so you've been in this industry for 40 years, something like that? 40 years?
43 years.
That's scary, 43 years. So looking back at young Lynn Davidson, from what you know now, is there anything that you would do particularly differently, or you're pretty happy with the journey that you've been on?
I think you can always do things better. Of course you can. Yeah. And we'll often look back and say we should have done this and should have done that, but every business does the same thing, Joe. Yeah. No, I think we're probably pretty happy there.
And advice, if you could give any advice to young people who are just starting out in business or in the turf industry or whatever, is there any? You've always got little pearls of wisdom that you throw at me every now and then. So anything spring to mind for you there?
Turf farm's a hard game. Yeah, and you've got to roll the punch a bit, but you've got to have the right products. And if anyone wants to come in the game, they need to grow good products. Yeah. And be good at marketing, because in the old days, it was just yellow pages, which was simple. you put an ad in the yellow pages and away you go.
Yeah.
It's not so simple now.
Yeah.
It's, in fact, it's more complicated now than it's ever been, marketing.
Yeah.
But there's also more market around too.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting answer. What do you see as the next sort of few years for Lynn? Is it obviously still working hard? You've got the sheep dairy as well, locally as well. Do you want to touch on that for a second? Because it's quite a unique. I've been lucky enough to go there a few times now. It's a beautiful setup you got there. Do you want to touch on the Towery sheep dairy as well and what that is?
Yeah, sure. In the late 80s, my wife and I bought some land, 300 acres, not far from where the existing turf operation is, and there was just sort of nothing there really. And we developed it, and now to a point where there's a sheep dairy there. My wife always, we're from sheep country, so somewhere along the line she wanted to make cheese. So I said, well, why don't we get some sheep? We'll make some sheep cheese. So she hunted around and found some milking sheep, or Wassie milking sheep, which come from the Middle East.
Yeah.
And she got those and established a sheep dairy and went on to make sheep cheese. And then my youngest daughter, Dallas, came in and they run that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your wife and your youngest daughter run the sheep dairy?
Yes.
And what kind of traffic do you get through at the sheep dairy? Do you hold, tastings there, or what sort of things does a sheep dairy do?
Every month we have they have a what they call a growers market there.
Yeah.
Where there's all the producers from around the countryside, the local area, bring their produce, their vegetables, and all sorts of stuff they make.
Yeah.
And we might have 300 or 500 people come through there on a Saturday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's good stuff. And it's very exciting. All the different people turn up. And apart from that, there's tour buses come through.
Yeah. For,
as you say, cheese tastings and morning teas and stuff like that.
Do you like sheep cheese?
Oh, yeah, it's good stuff.
What's easier, sheep or turf?
They've all got their problems.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned your daughter Dallas is in the dairy side of things, but you're also fortunate enough to have your other daughter Renee involved in turf now. What's that like for you with your kids coming through the businesses?
It's good. Renee's was she was in the police force for all her career up to this point, I suppose, and ended up as a detective sergeant in the child protection unit at Mount Isa. And after my sister passed away, between us, we sort of worked out I needed a bit of a hand.
Yeah.
So she turned up.
Yeah.
And Alana, and away we're going there. But no, they've done very well. The pair of them done very well.
Yeah.
They've learned a lot, and they've really excelled.
Did you find anything challenging initially working with your kids, or is it a pretty easy sort of change for you?
No, I think we're very fortunate as a family in that we get on very well together. Yeah. We get on very well together. We're very, very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. I'd imagine it can be a satisfying thing. I'd imagine too, seeing your kids in both sides of your businesses do well.
That must have done very well. Yeah, a lot of this wouldn't be capable unless I had the great support of my wife either.
Yeah, sure. No,
did a great job.
No, that's great. That's great. Now looking back, you've obviously been involved in a lot of different associations over the years, and you've met a lot of wonderful people. Who have been the key people, I guess, from a career point of view? You mentioned your family there, which is an obvious one, but from an industry-specific point of view, are there any people that stood out for you as real mentors or people that have helped you along the way? Yeah,
my word. Bill Casamati would be number one.
Yeah.
Bill was a wonderful man, absolutely extraordinary mind, the way to think of everything about turf, and you couldn't stop the bloke.
Yeah.
I've been overseas with him and all other places with Bill, but it's probably one of the great travesties and losses to the industry that a lot of people didn't get the chance to meet Bill and to experience who the man was and get some of his knowledge.
Yeah.
He was really a great man.
I've heard some stories, and from what I understand, he was a pretty unbelievable marketer and seller of turf, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah, very much so, yeah.
I think I might have only got to meet him maybe one time, but we've had a fair bit to do with Strathair, but some of his stories are incredible.
Yeah.
Further from Bill, so I guess Bill was the point that got you into the sports side of turf, was he? And anyone else other than Bill in the early days? Was Max someone, should I say mentor with Max?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, Max and I have had a great relationship for a long time now.
Yeah.
And I've drawn a lot of strength from Max and his ability to grow stuff and advice on machinery and all sorts of gear like that. If you didn't know something, ring Max and he'd tell you whether he wants to know it or not, and he might be wrong or might be right, but he'd tell you something.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. No, it's a great story what you've told us now, and it spans 4 decades plus in the turf industry, and I'm so glad that we're able to have meetings like this where we can sit down and have a chat and let people understand your journey and the pioneering that Jimboomba Turf have done in the industry. And again, it's such a good story, and I'm so glad that you were willing to share it with us today. We took a little bit of pushing to get you to sit down and have a chat, but I'm glad you did. And again, I'm sure everyone who listens to this is going to really, really enjoy it and fully understand the Jimboomba story. So we appreciate you sitting down with.
Thanks, Joe.